In the dormitory, Zach took his things and placed them on the only empty bed, removing the name tag that had belonged to another person, replacing it with his own. In the classroom, he had sensed that something was wrong with the people in this dorm. On the surface, it seemed like they were on good terms going to class together. In fact, they were all protective of the petite figure in the center. Zach, as a civilian, got into the military academy on his own. Whether it was his emotional intelligence or his IQ, it wasn't low. Today's events combined with what he saw of her frail body during yesterday's training. He then boldly guessed that she was not a man. Just now in the cafeteria, only one test, and it was not surprising that there was a ghost. The rest of that roommate had just taken a vacation at the beginning of the school year and had never reported for duty, so the dormitory was randomly assigned, and as soon as he applied for a change, the school approved it. Evelyn and the others returned to the dorm to see Zach sitting at his desk with a big grin on his face. "What are you doing here?" Daniel inquired unhappily. Zach bloomed into a big smile. "Hello guys, we'll all be roommates from now on." Richard licked his back teeth. "Really? But I don't think the roommate who hasn't shown up yet is named Zach, is he?" "Yes, but I just requested to switch over at lunch, so from now on your roommates will be me," Zach replied with a smile. Robert condensed a metal flying dagger directly in front of Zach and levitated it threateningly. "What are you going to do?" Robert droned. One wrong word from him, and no doubt the knife would land on him in the next second. With a wave of Zach's hand, the power system of the entire dormitory was paralyzed, with a hint of lightning still attached to the flying knives. "I'd like to ask what you're trying to do by harboring a noble woman in your dorm," he mockingly asked back. If it was just a simple woman, they could have turned it over to the Federation, and in accordance with the status of these few people, it wasn't difficult to want Evelyn. But the reason they were trying to hide it, even at the risk of being punished, could only be a noble woman. Only the noble daughter, not something they could get just because they wanted it. As soon as he said that, the others showed their hands, and the dormitory was filled with fire, ice, and electricity. Richard was busy wrapping his arms around Evelyn, his right arm unfurling a transparent shield to protect her. "Can you guys stop fighting? Can't you talk things out?" Unfortunately, her voice was drowned out within the shield, and no one could hear her except Richard. Richard gently looked at her. "Don't worry about it. Are you tired? Do you want to sleep against me for a while?" She was a pig, but she couldn't sleep even if she was a pig. Warning: Dormitory 403 maliciously damaging public property. Each person will be deducted 2,000 credits. The familiar broadcast sounded again. It made the already impoverished Evelyn even worse. She apprehensively pulled out her light brain to take a look at the credits column, minus 4,000. Richard also saw her movements and gave a comforting smile. "Don't be afraid, I'll pay it back for you." He maneuvered a few times on his own light brain, and Evelyn received a message notification on her side. "Richard transferred a credit to you." Evelyn tapped in and counted 6 zeros. "You can top up your credits into credits, converted 1 for 1. Following his instructions, Evelyn tentatively maneuvered and exchanged it for 10,000 credits. Subtracting the school deduction, the figure went back to positive in a flash. Richard stroked her head. "Buy whatever you want. I'll transfer it for you if it's not enough." Evelyn rubbed her hands together. "It's not good. There's nothing wrong with it. Just use it without worry." It would be a bit pretentious to refuse. Never mind. Later when they finished fighting, she would give Richard a little bit of purification, just as a reward from him. Now that she wasn't worried about running out of money, Evelyn watched with interest as they fought. These people's physical qualities were really nothing to write home about. Not to say that they were invulnerable to knives and guns, but at least it was hard for ordinary cold weapons to hurt them. It would have to be an alien ability to do them any damage. "Richard, what kind of psychic ability do you have?" she asked casually as she watched. "Mental faculty." Evelyn's eyes lit up. "Wouldn't that be strong?" Richard saw the look of adoration on her face and felt comfortable in his heart, smiling proudly. "Well, of all the powers, the spirit department is the strongest." They were chatting happily inside, but the few fighting men outside were not happy. Exhausted from fighting, but it created conditions for Richard. Everyone stops moving. Under the continuous attacks of several people, Zach has already suffered many injuries, but everyone has a sense of proportion and did not hurt his life. Seeing them stop fighting, Richard coolly opened the shield. The inside of the dormitory was in a state of disrepair. The bedding and books were either burnt or soaked. Zach ignored the injuries on his face and approached with a smile. "You're Evelyn, aren't you?" "Hello, I'm Zach." "Hello. Not familiar either. Not much else to talk about." Zach apologized. "Sorry for damaging your bed. I have all new bedding. Why don't you rest at my place for a while, and I'll have a robot come and fix it for you this afternoon." A few of the others stared at him menacingly. No wonder he kept fleeing to other places during the fight just now, only skipping his own bed. It made it so that now in the entire dormitory only his place was intact. For a moment the others were angry and anxious. They didn't want Evelyn to sleep there, but everything else was damaged except for his place. If they let her sleep there, they were letting Zach take advantage of them for nothing. Evelyn couldn't do such a thing if she just met him and went to sleep in his bed. It's fine. I'm fine without a nap. Zach wasn't disappointed. You seem to be a purifier. These in your dorm are all the escorts you chose. Evelyn glanced at Richard and didn't answer. Richard saw that he was the first one she thought of, and his heart was happy, answering for her. Yes, if you want to join, the quota is full. Zach's expression did not change at all. If I remember correctly, the guards around each noblewoman are at least 10 people. That was correct, in groups of 10. A noblewoman of the first rank had a team of escorts. Those of the second rank had 2 teams. And so on. Richard narrowed his eyes, unable to deny that. William came out to round up the conversation. Zach had already applied to the school to move in, and whether they agreed or not, he would be in contact with Evelyn from now on. If he wasn't allowed to join the escort, maybe he'd even make Evelyn's existence public. It wouldn't be as simple as one more person for him then. It's fine for you to join, but you can't tell anyone about Evelyn's existence. William agreed with a smile. The first to rush was Robert, who looked to his twin brother, not understanding his intentions. Zach quirked his mouth. Looks like you have some smart people in your dorm after all. Daniel's chest rose and fell. What do you mean by that? Just literally. Seeing that they were about to do it again, William was busy explaining things. Everyone listened, but they didn't get excited again. They were just all a little lost. Evelyn looked out and had to say that William's disposal was the best. She smiled and spoke out. We have an hour or so before afternoon classes. I'd like to work on my purification skills. Let me try purifying you all. Everyone was honest when they heard this. Although the radiation value in their bodies didn't reach a critical point, it would occasionally produce pain, leading to fights where they didn't dare to use their full strength. After all, once they used their full strength to utilize their powers, the radiation value would skyrocket. Starting with Richard, Evelyn had rushed to purify the full radiation value on every single one of them. All the way to Robert, Samuel. After the purification of the 3 was over, her small face was pale and her head was a little dizzy. Daniel stopped her. There's no rush to purify the radiation. You're only going to have to rest for a month to get over it this time. Evelyn nodded. Her internal energy had all been utilized. She could only wait until she had absorbed the essence of the sun and moon at night and replenished it before continuing the purification. There was no place to sit in the dormitory after their fight, so everyone had to let her sit on Zach's bed first. Evelyn couldn't help but close her eyes and fall into a deep sleep. Zach was surprised. She can purify all the radiation? No one answered him. Just all worriedly looked at the exhausted Evelyn on the bed, as if her heart was gripped by a big hand with some pain. She woke up after only half an hour of this sleep. At the same time she woke up, she felt that all of her internal energy had returned. Not only that, it was much thicker than before. It seemed that purifying radiation could also help her cultivate. She was immediately excited to continue purifying for the other 3. Daniel asked her again and again, "Are you really okay? Doesn't your body feel bad?" Evelyn nodded her head, and as the crowd looked at her flushed face, they had to believe that she had truly recovered. Such a fast self-healing ability, plus the ability to purify all the radiation. They were sure of it. There was no stronger purifier in the Federation than Evelyn. After purifying all the remaining Kevin, William, and Zach in a row, that little face became miserably white again. It was almost time for class. Without consulting her this time, Daniel pursed his lips and took out his car to take her there. The other people looked also distressed. Only arranged Richard and Robert to follow in the car. The rest walked to class. Evelyn closed her eyes in the car for a moment, feeling much better. Although not all of the inner strength came back, but some of it came back, it was enough. Robert spoke in a small voice. "Thank you. You didn't actually have to help us purify all the radiation." Evelyn waved her hand unconcernedly. "Aren't we going to go for field training in a few days? After helping you all purify, my life can also be protected by one more layer. At least you won't have to cower in fear when fighting." The people inside the car were only moved in their hearts when they heard this. One must know that in the Federation, following the process of exchanging credits for purification opportunities, not only do you have to make a reservation months in advance, but you also have to wait in line at the noble maiden camp. Those noble women who are not high and mighty can purify 10% are considered noble women in a better mood. But Evelyn had directly purified all of them. If she did this to them, it was only right to protect her, even if it meant giving up their lives to protect her. The afternoon training session was Andrew again. The first thing he did in class was to look at Evelyn. It was really because this student had impressed him too much, obviously not good at anything, but stubbornly staying in the combat department. As an instructor, on the one hand, he felt that such a student was not self-important. On the one hand, he was somewhat touched by the fact that his body was so poor that he still had the perseverance to participate in the training. Right now, he looked at that small body with a pale face, as if he was going to pass out in the next second. Do not know what happened. The others carry 1,000 pounds of weight for 10 kilometers. Evelyn, you come with me. Daniel immediately spoke. Instructor, what are you calling Evelyn for? She's a little unwell. I'll take her place. Richard also followed. I can also take her place. Andrew's eyes were not kind. In the future, when you go to the battlefield and face the mutant species, you guys will also die for her, won't you? If there is that day, of course. Could be. The other students were dumbfounded. What the hell had that weak Evelyn done to them? Each and every one of them were so dead set on it. Zach looked at the situation and said it was bad. He was too busy to speak up and explain. We're all in the same dorm. It's everyone's responsibility to be friendly to our classmates. William chimed in. Yes, on the battlefield, we are all comrades who can give our backs to each other, and I am willing to die for my comrades. Everyone's brains turned around at this. Some of the emotional ones were already in tears, listening to these words. If everyone had this kind of realization, when they went to the battlefield in the future and faced the mutant species, everyone would definitely work harder because there were classmate comrades behind them. Seeing that they had revitalized the military's heart in just a few words, Andrew didn't say anything else. All cut the crap and hurry to train. Evelyn, I have my own arrangements. Seeing this, despite their worries, everyone had to carry their weights and go running. One is faster than the other. Just want to finish the training quickly and go to protect Evelyn. Evelyn was taken to the office by Andrew. Lie down in the medical bin. Evelyn waved her hand. Instructor, I'm fine. I'm just a bit tired. I'll rest for a while. Just lie down if you're told to. She had no choice but to lie in and let the machine scan her physical state. The medical warehouse made a mechanical sound. The preliminary diagnosis of the 19-year-old female's physical state is fatigue overload. Warm tip. It's good to purify the radiation value for the warriors, but you should also pay attention to the amount of energy you have. Hearing the female one made Evelyn want to get up. She thought this was the same as that medical silo William had. There hadn't been this reminder when they first used the medbay. The first one was a portable and convenient medical silo, and the other was a specialized one. Andrew's entire body stiffened when he heard the female, and he looked at Evelyn incredulously. How could this be? There was a physical examination at the entrance ceremony. Why hadn't they checked that she was a woman in the first place? The results from the medical warehouse would never be wrong. Then the reason why her body was so weak and she didn't have any powers, then it made sense. Because she wasn't a male since the beginning. She was an honorable purifier. Why did you hide your identity to come to the battle department? Did someone force you? What did they want? He asked 3 questions in a row, and Evelyn didn't even know which one to answer first. It was only possible to use that line again. I don't remember. Andrew tapped on his optical brain. Your situation has to be reported. Just the men in your dormitory. The highest psychic ability is only at the 4th level. They can't protect you at all. Evelyn didn't object. It was no longer something she could refuse just because she wanted to. Andrew quickly finished typing the content, and he paused as he sent it. If she was the one who lost her memory and entered the military school, then there must have been a purpose in the first place. Either she was forced by an unscrupulous person to enter the military school to steal secrets. Either that or she had her own reasons for having to enter the military school. Andrew felt that the second one was more likely, because even if she entered the military school, she was still just an ordinary student and wouldn't have access to the core secrets at all. Then why didn't she go to the Noble Girl camp when it was obvious that it had better treatment? Could it be that she had enemies in the Alliance? If she went to the Noble Girl camp, her identity would not be able to be hidden and she might be in danger? Thinking of this, Andrew canceled the message sending. Have you lost your memory and can't recall any bit of what happened before? Putting down the light brain, he inquired. Evelyn nodded. Well, I woke up here. Andrew's brow furrowed into a frown, twisting into a chuan. The situation at hand was tricky. If he was bent on reporting it, there was no telling what would happen then. Although he had never been used to seeing her in such a weak body before. But in the end, she was his student. As an instructor, how could he leave the soldiers under his hand unattended? He thought like this, painfully convincing himself. Where's your space knob? What's some stuff in there? Andrew questioned. Evelyn pulled out a key-like item from her pocket, the very same space knob of the original owner. I don't know the code, so I can't get in. Andrew took it. As an instructor in the combat department and a major general in the army, he had a special federal method to decrypt it. As usual, the space knob was only tied to the individual and could not be accessed by anyone but himself. Having to set up an additional password would be suspicious. I can leave your matter out of the report for now, but you are not allowed to stay in the boys' dormitory anymore. From today onwards, come to me every day after class, and I will arrange a separate dormitory for you. Contemplating for a moment, Andrew said. It's also good. To be honest, living with so many guys, she was also a little scared in her heart, especially with the unhidden desire in their eyes. Seeing that she didn't object, Andrew's voice was much gentler. You rest here first, and I'll find a way to help you recover your memories. The people outside ended their waited running one after another, and Andrew closed the door and left. This room seemed to be the school's medical room. Aside from a couple of medical bins, there were just a couple of stools. The interstellar age had long since eliminated the need for doctors, and medical bins outlawed such positions. It didn't matter if you were sick or not. You could just go in and lie down. Evelyn's fatigue just now had been cured by the medical silo, and she was now in okay shape, only that she hadn't recovered all of her inner strength yet. There wasn't much to do, so she sat by the window and watched Andrew drill the group of students. The afternoon's training ended quickly. Andrew came in with a few of her roommates. "How's it going? Feeling better?" Daniel was the first to run over and ask. The others gathered around in a rush, and Richard reached out to touch her forehead and looked closely at her face, which was reassuring to see that it was rosy and flushed with a healthy pink color. Andrew closed the door behind him and pulled a stool over to sit down. Looking at the men's concerned faces, his heart a little sour for some reason. "Evelyn won't be living in the dorms from now on, so you guys go back." Upon hearing this, Samuel froze and asked, "If she doesn't live in the dormitory, then where will she live?" "I will arrange a separate room for her." Daniel was the first to disagree. "No, if she lives alone on one side, what if she is in danger? Even if the school is well policed, who can say about accidents?" Robert also disagreed. Kevin wrinkled his eyebrows. "Instructor, you're also out of order. What kind of student lives in a separate dormitory?" Andrew replied with a sneer. "Do I need to say what her status is? The few of you who concealed it and didn't report it have already violated the federal law. You guys don't need to worry about the place I've arranged for her. I'm right next to her, and I'll be the first to notice any danger." William rattled the glasses on the bridge of his nose and smiled peevishly. "Instructor Pay, you didn't report it either, didn't you? If we broke federal law, then you did likewise." Andrew's eyes blazed. "Don't forget there are many other students next to you in your dormitory. Do you want everyone to know she's a noblewoman?" Samuel shook his head in assurance. "No, no one will know but us." Zach pondered for a moment. "I'm in favor of her having a single dormitory." The others burst out in anger. He pontificated. "A number of people have picked up on Evelyn's purification for us, except no one associated it with her," and his cheeks reddened slightly. "Girls ovulate once a month. Everyone has a keen sense of smell, and there's no shortage of smart people among the other students, so we won't be able to hide it for long." The crowd listened to this and collapsed on their stools in deflation. Eventually, they had to accept the fact that they were separated from Evelyn. Daniel secretly glanced at Andrew. Living alone on one side was no problem. His concern was that Andrew was also getting any ideas about Evelyn. "Message me if anything happens, okay?" Evelyn answered. She was a little sad to leave. At least she had lived together for a few days, and everyone had taken care of her. "We'll go to class together tomorrow." Daniel smiled and said okay. After everyone had left, Andrew handed her a space button. "I've opened it. Can you see if there's anything in there you're familiar with?" Evelyn took it and scanned it. Other than the items for daily food and drink, there didn't seem to be anything else inside this space button. Nope, there was also a letter. The content of the letter was saying that an identity had already been arranged for her, so that she must not return to the capital star. Evelyn read it in a cloudy way. "All letters are written. Can't they be written more clearly?" Andrew pulled out another helmet-like item. "Try it on and see if you can get some of your memories back." She took it and snapped it straight over her head. Not knowing which button Andrew had pressed, a stabbing pain shot through her temples. Sweat dampened the top of her head, dripping down with her brow. Bits and pieces flashed through her mind of the original owner. But in bits and pieces, they didn't come together to form a complete memory line. Andrew turned it off immediately when he saw she was having a hard time. "Are you okay?" He gently removed Evelyn's helmet for her and took out a square towel to carefully wipe the sweat off her face. Evelyn was a little out of sorts. I think it was the helmet. This helmet is mainly designed for memory loss patients. It will help the patients to retrieve their memories by stimulating the mental domain, so there will be some pain. Evelyn was non-committal but regretful. "I'm sorry, instructor. I don't seem to recall." Andrew smiled. "That's okay. There's no rush. Let's go. Take you to your dorm." He put his helmet away and took out a car to take Evelyn to her destination. The single dormitory he had arranged was relatively remote from the school, and there weren't usually many students over here. The only other occupant of the entire building besides her was Andrew. All the other rooms were vacant and were reserved for other faculty members. Those who can serve in the military academy are at least major rank. We usually not only have to be in school, but also to go to the army, generally live outside. Andrew wouldn't have moved into the school if he hadn't found her. The single dormitory Evelyn thought was a one-room layout. What Andrew had actually set her up with was an entire large flat. In addition to the basic bedroom and living room, the kitchen and game room were complete. Andrew had a thought. "I was going to live next door to you, but as you can see, it's a pretty big house, so if you're in danger, it might even delay me coming over." That was true. Evelyn had just looked, and there was more than one bedroom in the house as well, and people were there to protect her. She thought about it and spoke. Then why don't you pick a bedroom here? Andrew smiled and answered. He brought Evelyn to the dining room again and sat down. Hungry. What do you want to eat? I'll go buy. Evelyn really didn't want to eat any more Star-Age food. She looked at the fact that there was a kitchen here. Can I make it myself? She inquired in a low voice. Andrew was surprised. Yes, see what you want to make and I'll get the ingredients. Evelyn moved closer to him, her two heads coming together to browse them all on the optical brain. She was excited to see the familiar meats and vegetables. I want to eat this. How about chicken with mushrooms? And a spicy chicken. She chirped excitedly, discussing the ingredients. Andrew looked at the young girl near him, and his nostrils were flooded with a sweet, girlish fragrance, sweet and greasy, 10,000 times better than those fine perfumes. It wasn't that he hadn't come into contact with other noble women, but none of them had felt this way when confronted with Evelyn. Starting from those roommates of hers, he couldn't ignore. Himself seemed to. Developed an inexplicable possessiveness. Evelyn saw him not say anything after half a day of choosing and looked up. What's wrong? Her dark eyes reflected his reflection, and Andrew ignored the oddly fast pace of his heartbeat. Nothing. Did you choose? StarTime's deliveries were quick with Andrew's access. It was almost 2 minutes or so before the robot was at his door with the products he had ordered. Evelyn looked at the groceries she'd bought and rolled up her sleeves, ready to make a splash. She had read that the dishes had been irradiated, and just cooking them like that, she didn't think they would taste too good. After an afternoon of recovery, she had almost all of her internal energy back. So she chose to purify all the radiation inside the ingredients. She was busy in the kitchen, and Andrew asked at first if he wanted to help. After he peeled the potatoes, the whole thing down to the size of his thumb, Evelyn shooed him out of the kitchen. Andrew, in a rare moment of embarrassment, rubbed his nose and slunk off to the living room to take care of his work. It wasn't long before an aroma of food wafted from the kitchen. He too had eaten food with low radiation levels, and none of it smelled as good as today. Evelyn brought the dishes to the table one by one and untied her apron. Dinner's ready. The two sat down at the table. After just one bite, Evelyn wanted to weep. This is what people eat. Andrew restrained himself and took a taste. Evelyn looked at him. Is it good? Yummy. The two of them didn't have time to talk for the rest of the day. They were both too busy shoveling food into their mouths. Evelyn was almost full after an eighth. There was plenty left, and it was all taken care of by Andrew alone. She was dumbfounded. This man could eat a little too much. She had planned to save some rice for tomorrow morning's fried rice. After eating and drinking enough, Evelyn went into her room to wash up and sleep. System, come out. System replied anxiously. What's wrong? What's wrong? Evelyn's cold face. Why don't I have the original owner's memories? How could you not have it? You do. She is the one who crossed over. Evelyn pursed her lips. Where are the memories of the previous user of this body? System explains. Oh, she seems to have used a special potion on her own to seal her memories. Can you show me? Can you let me see it? No, I also only vaguely know the plot, not the details. Evelyn, it seems the first user of this body has secrets. What kind of situation would prefer amnesia to seal their memories? It must be because it's too painful. Evelyn speculated based on the clues so far. The first user of this body might have experienced some great pain, so she chose to seal her memories. The owner of that letter helped the original owner escape and advised so that she should never go to the Capital Star. Unsurprisingly, the original owner's enemy should be in the Capital Star. Alas, those who knew that she was on a birth mission, those who didn't thought she was on a revenge mission. How come there are so many things in every world's quests? The last world was better. Couldn't they just calmly give her an identity and let her give birth to a child in peace? In the following days, her training was reduced by Andrew by half, and she only needed to pretend every day. As the day of field training approached, Andrew was required to attend as an instructor. He had no restrictions on not letting Evelyn go. On the contrary, he thought it was good for Evelyn to participate, because what the students were participating in this time was considered a relatively low-level field training. Mutant species were present, but they were rare and would hardly cause any harm to the students. As an instructor, he would also monitor the students 24 hours a day in case they encountered any danger. With such a mechanism, it would be best for Evelyn to follow, because Andrew could monitor her in real time. Evelyn listened to his explanation and treated this field training as a spring break. After moving in, she hadn't thanked a few of her previous roommates yet. She had to leave the next day, so today she made a big table of good food to entertain her roommates. After saying hello to Andrew ahead of time, everyone flocked to the table as soon as class started. Evelyn was busy in the kitchen, and everyone had their hands full trying to help, but they were all noble children. Plus there were so many high-tech products in the intergalactic era. How had these young masters ever done anything like this? If we let them help any longer, all these dishes will be finished by Ho-Ho. Evelyn tensed her face and kicked the group out. Only Zach was left behind. After all, he was from a commoner's background and had to learn how to do housework from a young age. Zach was accustomed to being a drill sergeant, so of course there was no way he would let go of such a good opportunity. What are your plans after this field training? Despite the reluctance, everyone knew they couldn't protect her for much longer. This time it was Andrew who found out. Next time it could be another teacher instructor. Not everyone was willing to cover for her on the charge of breaking federal law. Evelyn knew this too, but she didn't care. As long as she wasn't forced into a pairing, going to Camp Noble Girl was fine. Go to Camp Noble Girl. Zach nodded, hesitating before exiting to ask, you'll be 20 next year. Any thoughts on the other half you'll be choosing then? Evelyn's hand froze. She didn't have any ideas yet. That was what scared her the most, having to choose her other half when she turned 20. If she couldn't find someone she liked in this remaining year, she would have to just pick someone to settle for. Noble ladies choose their other half. You have to choose 3 at the initial stage. You'd better look around while there's still time, because once you choose, you can't separate again. Evelyn's eyes widened. What? 3? Zach lowered his eyes. Yes, one of them can be chosen from the escort, and the other 2 must be chosen from the nobles. He raised his head, his face complex. The relationship between the nobles is intricate. I'm really worried that you won't be able to handle it. Thinking of something, he continued with a somewhat bereft look. But the ones in our dormitory, except for me, are all nobles. In terms of status, Daniel and Richard are also likely to run. You can choose them, but compared to other noble children, they are still young, not smooth enough, and their psychic abilities are only at the 4th rank. Anyway, there are pros and cons, I guess. It all depends on what you think. He analyzed it for himself. Evelyn wasn't a person who didn't know what was good for her. Thank you, I'll think about it carefully. Zach added, ordinary noblewomen choose their escorts at the age of 18. Your situation is different. I'm only afraid that the selection will start only when you go to the noblewomen's camp. I will put my best foot forward. He didn't ask Evelyn to definitely choose herself, but said that he would fight his best to guard beside her. This was a good grasp of the scale. It accurately poked Evelyn's heart. If he had made a demand that Evelyn choose him as her husband, she might have been a little upset. After all, she hated being manipulated. But with a character like Zach, who doesn't demand but only gives, she's a little ticked off. Still, it was a matter of watching and seeing, and there was no rush now. The 2 men got the food all done between conversations. Everyone sits down in unison. Clinking glasses. Thank you, Evelyn, for your hospitality. She smiles and replies. And Zach, he helped out a lot today too. After a meal, the crowd disperses. Andrew handed her a small ring. Any danger in field training, you can press the button on it to call me, and I'll show up right away. Thank you. Andrew smiled and rubbed her head. Get some early rest. She thought she should be tossing and turning and unable to sleep since she was traveling the next day, but she fell into a deep sleep as soon as she dipped into bed after her shower. The next day, the sky was beautiful, a sunny day. The students boarded the flying ship in order. Everyone was going to the 37th ranked Cloud Mist Star this time. There was dense vegetation there all year round, most suitable for freshmen to exercise. Some people who had been eroded by radiation and couldn't maintain their sanity would be thrown here as well. However, before the military academy students arrived, there were already warriors who had cleaned it up in advance. This time, it was a training tournament consisting of 8 people in a squad. The top 3 would be rewarded with credits from the school. Evelyn and the 8 people in their dormitory automatically formed a squad. Different squads would land in different places. There were trees all over the place below, and she couldn't tell which was which. Soon it was their turn. The flying ship opened its hatch, and everyone jumped down one after another. Evelyn glanced down. Holy shit, it's still dozens of meters from the ground. Just jump straight down? Daniel came around and grabbed her waist. Hold me tight. Abruptly leaving the calmness of the flying ship, the wind outside made her eyes squint as she wrapped her arms tightly around Daniel's neck. The heart that had been lifted high in the air was finally back in her stomach as she landed comfortably. Everyone gathered around. William glanced at Evelyn. Find the garrison first. No one had any objections. This competition was based on killing mutants to gain points, and they were sorted by points at the end. But they were bringing Evelyn with them, and before the battle, they had to arrange her first. Richard looked at the light brain and suggested, the nearest place with a water source is to the east. Samuel knew she loved cleanliness. Then go there. I'll boil water for you. You can take a shower first. Evelyn was resentful. Even though she loved cleanliness, she wasn't so much of a fool to be in the wilderness. No, just make do for a couple days. Daniel shrugged the tip of his nose. What's that smell? Kevin exclaimed. No good. There's someone nearby. The group immediately did a state of alert. I smell a very strong odor of blood. Robert's face was grave. Zach turned his head to look at Evelyn. At this moment, she also felt something strange, a slight pain in her lower abdomen. After living for several lifetimes, the feeling of a great aunt was still familiar to her. I'm sorry, I think I came that. As soon as she spoke, all the other men got a big blush, especially Kevin. He thought there was someone else in the neighborhood. Evelyn was annoyed that her period came when she was in the wilderness. There were not only mutants in the wilderness, but all kinds of beasts as well. With such a strong smell of blood, she was likely to attract danger. Zach didn't say anything, reddening the tips of his ears. Hurry up and get stationed. Evelyn still needs to clean up and take a shower and change clothes first. Obviously, this was not a good place to change clothes where they were staying now. Daniel directly picked up Evelyn in a cross-body hug. I'll hold you. Let's speed up our pace. The crowd knew that the situation was critical now, and their hearts were a little sour, but they didn't argue at this point. Without her slow walking dragging their feet, the entire group took less than half an hour to arrive at a small pond. On the flying ship, Andrew stared carefully at Evelyn as a small group. Seeing this, the other teachers laughed. Instructor Pei, you should still take a look at the other squads as well when you have time. He nodded and switched the screen to another squad. William directed everyone to quickly set up a tent, and Richard also separately set up a washroom for Evelyn, a square one that was about 1 or 2 square meters. But in the wild, it was pretty good. Zach blushed and took out a round object from the space knob and handed it to Evelyn. What's this? She inquired. Zach was surprised. You don't know? She wondered, and Zach hid his discomfort. It's what you girls use when you come to that. Evelyn was worried about what she would do without her aunt's napkin. She didn't realize that Zach had already prepared it in advance. This kid, his heart is so fine. Evelyn thankfully took it. Over there Richard had already boiled hot water. Kevin violently cut down a tree and dug a barrel out. You go take a shower. Everyone knew a thing or two about that side of a girl's life, but smelling that strong odor of blood, they knew she definitely needed a bath and a change of clothes. Robert filled the barrel with water and easily carried it to the washroom. Evelyn was really a bit embarrassed about what this was called. The ones who came to the field to kill mutant species. How come they were all busy for her to have her period? With a red face, she entered the washroom, stripped off her clothes, and scrubbed her body carefully. The others were guarding the outside, hearing the rattling inside. Although they couldn't see the picture, their minds unconsciously began to brainstorm. Everyone was at the age of blood and had not been in contact with girls. For a while each one of them was in a state of arousal, and that thing was so hard that it hurt. After Evelyn washed up, she took out that round thing of Zach's and began to study how to use it. Through the other high-tech products she had come into contact with before, Evelyn surmised that there should be a button of some kind, but she couldn't find it after half a day's research. She was getting a little anxious. If she kept this up, the blood was going to flow again. Zach! A small call came from inside. Daniel was the first to react and took it in his stride. Thinking Evelyn was in danger, he lifted the curtain straight away. A large scent of a woman's fragrance was inhaled into his nostrils, and as far as the eye could see there was snow-white skin like he'd never seen before, and Daniel looked at the view in front of him almost as if he'd lost his mind, his breath stuttering and his eyes glazed over. Evelyn was startled and covered her chest. What are you doing? Daniel stiffened as he looked at the flustered girl in front of him. Tiny droplets of water still rolling off that skin from just washing up. A rush of heat ran over the tip of his nose unexpectedly. Get out! Evelyn gritted her teeth. He froze and pulled the curtain closed, his voice like a mosquito. I thought you were in danger. Daniel wiped his nose as bright red blood gushed out, and he busied himself with pulling out a couple sheets of toilet paper to poke at his nostrils. Evelyn didn't have the heart to say, call Zach. The others also heard the ruckus over here, and one by one, they looked at Daniel and Zach with jealousy and envy. Zach came over in 3 or 2 steps. He wasn't as reckless as Daniel. In the doorway, he asked in a low voice, what's going on? Evelyn whispered to him. How does this thing you gave me work? Zach was stunned for a moment, a little tempted to laugh, and answered in a whisper with the tips of his red ears. Just stick it directly on. Just stick it on your panties. Evelyn breathed a sigh of relief and pulled out her panties from the space knob, and to her surprise the little round thing automatically fit over her panties and became a soft, fluffy tampon. Samuel looked at Daniel's 2 nosebleeds. What did you see? So excited. Daniel shook his head. No, didn't see anything. You're lying? You didn't see your nosebleed? I really hate myself for reacting slowly. Every step of the way, this guy beat me to it. When I got off the flying ship, on the way over, and just now. The cheapness all let him take advantage of the kid alone. After Evelyn finished cleaning up, Richard and the others decided to split up. A wave of people guarded here to accompany Evelyn. A wave of people went out to kill mutants. The highest force value in the current team was Zach and Robert. Both of them were at the peak of the 4th order. The others were either early or mid-4th order. Daniel considered it and did not hesitate. Let Zach and Robert accompany Evelyn. Carrying the hot water that Richard had brewed, she took a small sip. Hearing this, she didn't agree with it. It was supposed to be out to kill mutants. What was the point of having the highest force value all accompanying her? But the others also did not listen to her, insisted on having the two strongest people guarding her side. No one had any objections, and soon Richard led the way and led the others out. Zack pulled out a piece of brown sugar from the space button. I heard that your stomach hurts a little during special times. Would you like to make some of this? Evelyn was surprised and looked over. He was really meticulous. He even prepared the brown sugar. She didn't refuse, and first cleared the radiation within the brown sugar and soaked a small piece in. She had internal power to contain it, and hadn't had a stomach ache for a long time, but he was also being kind. Robert lowered his eyebrows and looked this way, a little frustrated inside. He had prepared nothing. With nothing else to do, Evelyn approached them for a chat. Earlier you guys said that mutants are monsters that come from people being infested with radiation? Well, there are also beasts that have been eroded by radiation. As the words left his mouth, Robert moved his ear tips warily, shielding himself in front of Evelyn. Zack stood up as well, and there was a rustling in the grass in the distance, a very common sound. At this time of day, however, it felt like a heavy dose of unease. At first, Evelyn thought it might be the wind, but as time went on, the sound got closer. Zack and Robert escorted her back to the tent first, and before it was too late, a huge monster suddenly came out of the bushes at them. Robert condensed a golden shield to stand firmly in front of Evelyn. Zack directs a few lightning strikes at the monster, and it acts as if it isn't afraid of pain, not stopping even though its skin and flesh have been burned, revealing the bright red, tender flesh underneath. Evelyn's eyes widened. The one with a deep red body and a mouth full of fangs was clearly a human being, but apparently no longer had a human consciousness. Crawling on its hands and knees on the ground this way. Is this the mutant species? It's a match with the zombies of the last days. Zack and Robert were busy attacking, but they weren't too scared. A mutant species was nothing to them. They were just worried that the horrifying looks would scare Evelyn, only to see that the mutant species was roasted by Zack in 2 strokes, its skin and flesh churning. Ignoring the pain, it hissed as it tried to pounce again. Robert saw fit to shoot a few flying daggers over towards the wounds on his body. The mutant cried out and crawled more violently this way. Unfortunately, Zack and Robert's attacks were too intense. In a matter of minutes, the mutant species was killed by the 2 men. Robert darkened his face and kicked the corpse at his feet, dragging it with one hand towards the woods. This thing couldn't be left here to dirty Evelyn's eyes. Zack looked at it without saying anything and turned to her. Tired? Want to get some sleep? Evelyn shook her head. She always felt that just now the mutant species was shaking people with that last call. In the end of the world, those low-ranking zombies would be like that, and when they couldn't beat them, they yelled out and ended up calling in a group of high-ranking zombies. The hissing sound it just made, will it attract other mutant species? Zack froze for a moment and replied, no. The mutant species are all humans whose entire sanity has been eroded by the radiation. There is no sense of thinking. They will only attack by instinct. Just as she finished speaking, undulating screams and hisses came from all around her. Evelyn's heart tightened and Zack blanched. She wasn't going to be a crowbar, was she? One after another, a large group of mutant species emerged from the grass. What's going on? Zack exclaimed. Not to mention, how could there be so many mutant species in the cloud forest? He roughly counted. There had to be about 10 of them. And this wave of mutants was different from the previous one. They came around the attack and shot a water arrow towards Evelyn's side. Zack struck out with a lightning bolt. The water conducted electricity, and the water arrow directly exploded in midair. Robert, who disposed of the bodies, also came back quickly, killing mutants along the way and stepping hard to Evelyn's side, standing in front of her at the same time as Zack, shielding her front and back. They have powers? Robert nodded heavily. Mutant species like this shouldn't be here. There was no telling what went wrong. They twisted their faces and lunged with bloody mouths. Evelyn quickly pulled out the machete from the space knob, really the system backpack. With Zack guarding her with Robert, there was no need for her to do anything at all. The 2 of them cooperated and killed several mutant species in a row. Evelyn was wondering if these mutants would call out again if they couldn't be defeated. In the next second, another wave of mutants emerged from the bushes. Martyr, is she a prophet? The more mutants were killed, forcing Robert and Zack to pull out their guns from the space button, left-hand weapon, right-hand psychic ability. The battle is getting more and more intense. The 2 people's supernatural ability is little by little exhausted. In the end, can only rely on the hands of the weapon and instinct to block in front of her. Zack and Robert had already tried their best, but with the passage of time, their physical strength was gradually exhausted. Suddenly, a mutant species rushed out from the darkness and attacked towards Evelyn. Her eyes widened in surprise, but Zack and Robert, who were entangled in the mutant, were unable to arrive quickly, and they could only watch as the mutant pounced on Evelyn. For a moment, The two men's eyes widened in anger, and the used-up psychic energy in their bodies surged once again. Evelyn wasn't too scared. She gripped the machete in her hand tightly and swung it straight out. The mutant's head was sliced off by her neatly. The battle gave her back a bit of the feeling of being in the end times. Don't froze. It's all points now, Evelyn finished saying herself instead of staying behind the two. She raised her machete and kept swinging it out, killing one as it came. The three were in a triangular formation heading out for the kill. Zack took one shot at a time. Robert's weapon was much more advanced, and with one shot, he was able to blast several mutants to death. On the flying ship. See, I knew they could do it. A handsome man held a glass of wine and took an appreciative sip. Andrew was staring intently at the monitor. He had just tried to get over there the moment the mutants appeared. Manuel appeared just in time. He pressed Andrew's shoulder and spat disdainfully. This time it's out for them to exercise. The moment there's a mutant species you run over there. What's the point of competing? Andrew glared angrily. But those aren't ordinary mutants.